Birds, but mobile apps for serious businesses, hosted by Steve O'Brien, Antenna's VP of Product Marketing, and panelists Rohit Sharma, Global Head of Mobility at Virtusa, and Mike Hogan, Antenna's Senior Director of Systems Engineering. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. First off, we'll be live tweeting during today's session, so if you have questions for the panel or would like to join the conversation, use hashtag SeriousAppsWebinar or Twitter handle @AntennaSoftware, or you can post them on the Q&A panel on the GoToWebinar. We'll cover as many questions as we have time for at the end of the session. Today's webinar will last approximately an hour and will be recorded for on-demand viewing post-show. At this time, I'd like to turn the controls over to Steve O'Brien, who will further introduce today's panelists.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Mobile Masters webinar today. My name is Steve O'Brien, and I'll be serving as your moderator. Joining me is Rohit Sharma from Virtusa and Mike Hogan from Antenna Software. His focus is to leverage the unique capabilities of mobility to drive differentiated enterprise and consumer apps. So he focuses on capabilities like voice, image processing, geolocation, and visualization. Before he started the mobility practice, Rohit was the lead technology consultant with Virtusa, finance, telco, and in the retail sector. So welcome, Rohit.
Thanks, Steve.
And we can hear you fine. With me here in Jersey City at Antenna HQ is Mike Hogan. Mike's been with Antenna Software for over 11 years. So he's been part of the mobility revolution from the inside. He's been involved with dozens of mobility projects for Fortune 1000 companies worldwide, and he currently serves as Antenna's Director of Systems Engineering. Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Steve.
So our agenda today is hopefully exactly what you signed up for. We tried to use a catchy title like It's Not Angry Birds to draw attention to the fact that enterprise mobility is very different and somewhat more complex than a typical game that you'd find in the App Store. So I chose my personal favorite game, and by many accounts, the most popular game of all time, Angry Birds, to try to highlight some of the differences and maybe even talk about some of the commonalities. So that's what we'll do. Add some really enterprise-class mobile apps and see if we can highlight the commonalities and differences. And pause for 2 seconds here. We know that your time is valuable. We appreciate you making time to be with us today, so we'll try not to waste it by giving you a sales pitch. You can visit our website if that's what you're interested in. But if we're going to talk about serious apps for serious businesses, you should at least know who it is you're listening to and what our perspective is on the topic. Antenna Software helps enterprises to build, run, and manage mobile applications and content. AMP Chroma is the antenna mobility platform, and enterprises who deploy AMP Chroma are able to minimize risk, reduce costs, and improve time to market for their mobile initiatives. So we're here today to talk about serious business applications. So you might ask what kind of apps we've built for business. So clockwise from the top left, I'll just briefly touch on each of these. If you've ridden on Amtrak lately, you know that the conductors now use iPhones to electronically scan passenger tickets, check people in real time, provide service to passengers, and report equipment failures and maintenance issues. They're 100% proficient and completely on an iPhone. In the middle on the top is Eaton. They're a global manufacturing company, and they have a product catalog with over 200,000 products that's now moved to an iPad for field sales and distributors. And it replaces hundreds and hundreds of catalog pages and what used to be a pretty tedious manual process for reviewing products and placing orders. On the top right, did a pretty basic CRM application that provides sales reps with consistent real-time information about pharmaceutical products. And they've reported that they've shortened sales cycles and simplified the management and reporting within their sales process. On the bottom right is FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association, and they have an app called the Preliminary Disaster Assessment App, or PDA, that's used by 200 inspectors in the field. And it's a basic data collection app that helps them to quickly and efficiently collect data during natural disasters, and it just helps eliminate paperwork and minimize errors. And they use the data from this app to determine when states require federal disaster relief, so it's pretty important. In the bottom on the middle, pretty familiar logo, Coca-Cola Enterprises uses a mobile distribution app to track their drivers' routes and provide real-time visibility to field activities. They've eliminated paper reports and toll-free numbers for time reporting, and they've reduced a number of trips to distribution centers that the drivers make. Coke has estimated that they've saved over $10 million just in fuel savings and telephony charges alone. And on the bottom left is Novo Nordisk, maybe not as familiar to all of you, but it is a huge global healthcare organization with 32,000 employees in 75 countries. And last year they deployed a mobile CRM app on the iPad across the EU and China. It's still pretty early, but the results have been really positive for streamlining their sales process and improving their data quality. So these are the kind of apps that we'll focus on during this webinar. Right now I'd like to allow Rohit to introduce Virtusa.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I think those are some very, very exciting applications. Let me spend just a little bit quick overview around Virtusa. So Virtusa provides end-to-end IT services to Global 2000 companies, and we founded in 1996, headquartered in Mass, and we have operations in North America, Europe, and Asia. And as you can see, and you'll find more information on our website, we have seen some very strong revenue growth over the last few years. Went public in 2007, and this year we are scheduled to close our current year in March with a revenue range of about $330 million. Now at Virtusa, we believe that IT challenges in the next few decades will really center around mobile, cloud, big data, and social. And we focus very heavily on these areas with dedicated practices. And today we are going to focus a lot on the mobile practice and how we help transform our clients' businesses both in a consumer and employee setting. If you can go to the next slide, Steve. Just to give you a quick overview of our client base, we have about 100 clients. This is across Virtusa, not specifically to the mobility practice. About 90% of the clients have worked with us for 3 years or more, so it's very high retention. And you know, we tend to work with them across several of our core competency areas, such as business BPM, business process management, ECM, big data, data warehousing, BI, and mobility. So a large chunk of our business really comes from the BFSI segment. So if you look at some of the clients such as Chase, Fidelity, Standard Chartered, we work with them to drive from a mobility perspective, not only the offerings that they provide to consumers, but also capabilities that they use within the enterprise to enable their employees. From a Chase perspective, we've worked with them over the last 3 years to really help them roll out retail banking solutions, wholesale banking solutions, and also within the enterprise HR solutions, and deployed an app store for them for delivering their enterprise apps as well. At Fidelity, again, we focus a lot on the consumer facing applications as well as the enterprise side, and we will cover some of the specific examples down the line. If you look at Standard Chartered, the kind of work we're doing over there, from enabling their branch of the future by providing the ability to do a lot of work really on dedicated iPad-based kiosks in the branch. That's a very exciting application that we feel of mobile capabilities and really helping transform businesses. And then if you look at some of the healthcare capabilities with Alair, with Aetna, really helping them drive disease management at the next level. And also from a retail perspective, really working with McDonald's to drive some very, very core capabilities across their enterprise. So we'll probably cover that in future slides as well. So I think the bottom line really is that we help enterprises deliver complex mobile applications that help them drive revenue growth from a consumer perspective or enable productivity from an employee perspective. And our mobility focus is really around unique mobile capabilities that can be built upon strong industry-leading platforms such as Antenna. And I'll cover more about this in later slides. But at this point, I would like to bring it back to Steve. And Steve, please take it forward.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Rohit. We look forward to hearing more about some of those apps in more detail later. But as promised, the theme of our talk today is serious apps for serious business. And in order to highlight what makes enterprise mobile apps truly different from the million or so apps that you might find in a public app store, we're going to compare a typical enterprise mobile app with a game that most of us are at least a little bit familiar with. Some of us may be excruciatingly familiar with, Angry Birds. And I thought it would be appropriate for me to do at least a little bit of research before this webinar, and I did find some interesting stats about Angry Birds. Some of you may know that it is developed and produced by a company called Rovio in Espoo, Finland. But Angry Birds was originally released in December of 2009, exclusively in the Apple App Store, and for Android about 10 months later. But in the first year, Angry Birds generated over 50 million downloads, which is really impressive until you hear that one of their follow-on games called Angry Birds Space generated 50 million downloads in just over a month. So Angry Birds, in one form or another, has been the #1 game worldwide since about mid-2010, and it's in use today by more than 200 million people every month. And Rovio now has an entire line of Angry Birds merchandise and plush toys. They have their own YouTube channel, and of course, they're working on a 3D animated movie that is coming out in 2 or 3 years from now. And just to make us all really jealous, I'll point out that Angry Birds cost about $100,000 to develop, and last year it generated over $200 million in revenue. Rovio is privately held, but a number of analysts value the company at close to $10 billion. That's with a B. So it may be a game, but it is definitely very serious business. So let's look at what makes Angry Birds great. First of all, it's a mobile app. And as a mobile app, you couldn't ask for more simplicity. First, you just go find it in the App Store. It'll be at the very top of the most popular list, or you can just search for Angry. You download the free version to your device, and you're ready to go. But how do you play? Well, the first thing that pops up are the instructions, and there's the instructions right there on the screen. That's it. There's no words, there's no manuals, there's no setup, there's no learning how to use the controls or steer or fire weapons. You pull back the slingshot and let the birds fly. Then you just keep playing. The levels get harder and more complex, of course, and new birds are introduced that have different features and some strategies even required sometimes. When you run out of levels, you go check for an update, and there's probably more waiting, or you just download another version and start all over again. If you get frustrated, help is available. But no self-respecting Angry Birds player would ever use the Mighty Eagle to cheat. So that's it. It's 4 steps to understand the genius, I call it the genius of Angry Birds, a $200 million empire. So an enterprise app shouldn't be much harder than that, right? Let's do the same thing. Let's break down an enterprise app. First, I'll skip over finding the app in the App Store because that's probably not where it is. Enterprise apps can be in a public app store, but they can also be distributed on an enterprise app store, private store, or through an enterprise portal like SharePoint, or even just over email. The first real step of using an enterprise app is to log in. And the #1 concern of most enterprise architects regarding mobility is security. So logging in accomplishes both authentication and authorization, which sound alike, but they mean different things. Authentication is, is the person holding this device really the person who's supposed to be holding it? And authorization is, if this is that person, what permissions do they have? Can they see all the data or just some of the data? Can they read the data, or can they also edit the data and update and add to the data? So all of that is accomplished by just logging in. And then logging in also establishes a secure connection to the back-end enterprise systems. The level of security, of course, is dictated by the requirements of the app itself and the design of the developers, but a truly enterprise app should be able to accommodate any level of security that's required, and not just during transmission. Sometimes people say, oh, we use HTTPS, and so our data is secure. But that's not true, because the data, remember, you got to remember, it's traveling from some back-end system somewhere to some sort of middleware layer over wires, and then over some other wires to some transmission point, and then over the air to the device. And it needs to be secure at every staging area and every transmission area in between. So the data, in addition to that, the data handling and retention policy needs to be compliant. If you transmit a bunch of secure data to a mobile device, and then that device is lost or stolen, you should not be at risk of losing that data. The enterprise or the business shouldn't be at risk of losing that data. The data access and retention strategy should have checks and balances in place to guarantee the security of the data. Step 2, that's not enough. That was just step 1. Step 2 is workflow and integration. So it's pretty unlikely that our enterprise app is going to be as simple as shooting some pigs with some flying birds. The app needs to be, though, almost as simple to use. The app needs to guide the user through the right workflow steps in the quickest, most efficient way possible. So whether it's a distribution app or a sales enablement app or an expense reporting app, the user needs to be able to figure out what they're supposed to do next. So these screenshots that you see they're from a fairly simple field service app. And you can see that the user is presented with 6 possible actions when they log in. And when you drill into just one, that's the top one called My Service Calls, there's 5 possible attributes I can read or edit. So it has the opportunity to be pretty complicated. But since it's on a mobile device for use in the field and not for some analyst sitting at a computer with lots of time to figure out what to do, the entire workflow needs to be simplified down to the basic elements. And it's laid out in the most logical possible fashion to kind of mirror the task at hand. So this is a credit to whoever designed this app that it is that the workflow is so clear and simple. When I click on Service Call, the app recognizes that I'm on site with a customer, and it presents me with just the relevant information that I want to consume or edit during a service call. All the other choices are set up in the same way. And of course, the information I'm going to need is likely on my phone, but it came from an enterprise system back at headquarters or maybe my service center somewhere. So integrating with whatever enterprise systems my company uses is really critically important to getting the job done. So whether it's Oracle or Salesforce or SAP or Workday, I need the data now on my mobile device and not later on my laptop when I'm back in the office. All right, so now we're logged in and being directed what to do. What's next? Uh-oh, I just lost the connection. You know, I'm in the basement of a building trying to provide some service, or I got on the elevator as I was getting to the customer's office and looking for the data for the job. What happens when I lose that connection? Well, unfortunately, most enterprise apps are going to require some form of communication with some back-end system somewhere. But in the real world, mobile connections aren't always available or reliable. Since this is a field service app, the reality is that I won't always have perfect connectivity. But what happens then? The app can't stop working. Well, a truly enterprise class application provides secure, scalable messaging for transaction processing and guaranteed message delivery. Apps need to sync when they're connected, but they need to continue to function in offline mode when wireless networks aren't available or aren't reliable or they're too slow. So in enterprise mobility, in the world of enterprise mobility, we sometimes refer to this as store and forward. Store and forward guarantees the integrity of transactions and messages regardless of your connection state. So it's why the conductors on Amtrak can continue to scan tickets when they're on a train traveling 100 miles an hour through a forest with pretty sketchy connectivity. It means that store and forward means that mobile apps work whether they're connected or not. That data is available whether you're connected or not. And that transactions are captured accurately whether you're connected or not. So this isn't something that Angry Birds has to worry about, but it's something that enterprise class applications definitely need to worry about. And then the last step is CRUD. Some of you may be familiar with the acronym. CRUD. It's CRUD. It stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete. And it's another way that enterprise apps are different from games. So most enterprise apps require the user to enter data that gets stored in some enterprise system somewhere. So that means that in addition to retrieving data, they also need to have the ability to create new data or provide updates and changes to existing data. So whether the user types it in from their keyboard or scans a barcode or takes a picture, that data that's created by the user needs to be handled properly and stored securely. You can see some examples, for this simple field service app that we've been walking through. You can see some examples on the screen of how data gets created, updated, and deleted. And so this really gets to the crux of the differences between a game like Angry Birds and an enterprise app. And in case it wasn't obvious from the previous examples, I've kind of summarized some of the most basic differences here in the table. For distribution, it's App Store distribution only versus a number of other ways to get the data. One thing I didn't talk about was approval. But in order to put an app in the App Store, you need to have approval from the App Store itself. In order to push an app out to employees in a company, you need lots of approvals from the line of business, from the managers, from the IT department, from the IT managers, from the users. It can be a complicated process to get an enterprise class app into the hands of the people who need to use it. For integration, we've talked a lot about, I didn't talk much about the integration required for a game, but that's not to say that it is not required. Most games are produced to make money, so they need to have some way to monetize, either through an e-commerce connection or through some kind of ads that get served, advertising. So integration is not non-existent in the B2C or the game world. Integration is very, very important. It's just a different kind of integration. And then monitoring. Monitoring for games or B2C apps is completely optional. And there are easy ways like Game Center that game creators can monitor the usage, the downloads and the usage of their apps. Monitoring and management for an enterprise app is definitely not optional, and it's really important. Performances like what devices it's installed on, where the data is residing, who's accessing the data. All of that monitoring and management is critically important in the B2E world. And then we talked a lot about workflow and security on the enterprise side, and those concepts are almost completely non-existent for a typical game. So there are definitely major differences between games and enterprise apps, but that is not to imply that there's no commonality at all. There definitely is. For example, the whole point of building an app is to get someone to use it. So it's either to make money for the person developing the app or for the company to make more money or become more efficient. Well, people are people no matter what they're using, so they won't use an app that's slow or ugly. So one common trait between Angry Birds and a business app is that they need to be simple and responsive. They need to be attractive. Mobile apps should be fun to use. They should be intuitive. They should be appealing. The better the app is designed, the more people will use it and the more effective it will be. And that applies equally to an enterprise app as it does to a game in the App Store. And integration that I mentioned on the last slide, the best games often have some kind of a social integration, either where players can compete against each other or post their high scores. I can't imagine playing Words with Friends by myself. It's kind of an oxymoron. So even simple games have ways to share information across user communities. And then I talked already about the monetization. Either e-commerce or advertising usually is integrated into a game. So integration is really important and highly valuable in both cases. It's just very different. So I'll let you all take a break from hearing my voice now and turn it back to Rohit to talk about some more enterprise success stories.
Thanks, Steve. I think if you could go to the next slide, probably have to play it out. Can you please play out the slide?
We should be seeing the slide of
Yeah.
catalog of 40-plus apps.
Yeah, so I think that was a great background on really what needs to um, happen from an enterprise perspective to launch a really enterprise class application that meets enterprise goals, provides the security that we need over there, and also have the ability to work in an online offline mode. And that's really foundational capability that you need to have in place. What we at Virtusa believe is that that foundation needs to be built upon by leveraging unique mobile capabilities to provide really differentiated offerings. So, for example, if you look at let's say an insurance app like the Allstate app, you can report an accident and file for a claim on the spot by using the geolocation to actually automatically fill in the address, for example, taking pictures around the accident and filing the claim right then and there. And that really provides you the power of actually using what the device knows, which is where it is, what the device provides, which is a camera, and kind of integrating it together on top of a secure enterprise-grade platform like Antenna to actually deliver a very differentiated offering to your consumers. Another perspective is from an employee perspective, for example, is take an example of commercial lending. You're in a commercial lending space and you need to go and survey a particular commercial property. The surveyor can actually carry an iPad with him, which walks him through the things that he or she needs to look at, and also have the ability to take pictures, record their voice for particular notes, and all of that is collated and presented as a multimedia report, which can also be converted into a PDF document for risk assessment. So again over there, you're probably in an offline mode, or at least have a very unreliable, potentially unreliable connectivity, and you're actually using very sound foundational capabilities and adding unique mobile capabilities on top to deliver a very productivity enhancing application. So if you look at some of the examples that we have here on the screen, almost all of them tend to use a unique mobile capabilities. Chase, for example, was the first bank to bring in check deposit, so you could take a picture of a check and deposit that check, and then there's a bill pay capability now where you can take a photo of a bill and actually make payment for the bill. There's a lot of innovative use of image capture over there to kind of drive unique capabilities. So I just wanted to share kind of this portfolio image of some of our applications and how we've kind of used unique mobile capabilities on top of the core platform capabilities that Steve was talking about to really provide enhanced value to either the consumer or to the employee. If you can go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, Steve?
Yeah, there's just a short delay. It's loading now.
Sorry. Yeah, it's up there. So we just wanted to kind of take a segue and focus on what are those unique mobile capabilities. So we look at voice, image processing, geolocation, visualization, and virtualization as kind of unique capabilities that the device offers, which is much more beyond what your traditional desktop and portals can offer. So if you take a step back and can try to integrate these capabilities into your portal capabilities, that leads to solutions across customer self-service, field enablement, customer acquisition, product information, customer self-service, and specifically on the visualization side, it provides the ability to really enhance the customer experience, either from a consumer perspective or even from an employee perspective, and really provide very enhanced dashboards. One of the examples I want to give on the visualization side was a case where we one of our clients building a B2E application for employee assessment, and they wanted to have a 2x2 matrix instead of your traditional spreadsheet to kind of take a list of people and drag them into one of those 4 boxes. So they're really taking the power of the platform in terms of visualization, in terms of touch, and creating very unique capabilities from an employee perspective. But if you were to spend a little time going through each one of these from a voice perspective, we really believe that with the advent of Siri, you can do a lot with voice. We'll talk a little bit more in the next few slides over there, but really drive a whole brand new experience for your consumers and employees, because voice is a very natural way of communicating. I mean, as humans, we've been using voice for maybe a millennia or 2 millennia, before we ever used a keyboard or anything like that to really be able to communicate. Image processing, again, the whole capability of taking a picture and doing something with it is very powerful, whether that's a QR code or a barcode or a picture of a car or a picture of a movie poster. Taking a picture and driving business processes through it is what we believe is a unique capability that mobile offers. And from a geolocation perspective, I think one of the key capabilities that we are looking at is really around how we can introduce augmented reality on top of geolocation, both in offline and online mode, or low bandwidth and high bandwidth mode, and be able to really drive a lot of differentiated offerings, like being able to navigate within a mall or navigate within a railroad station. So very, very key capabilities that you can actually drive using geolocation. So with that, I would like to kind of dive into, start with kind of an example of a vertical solution. In this case, we chose a mobile wallet, mobile payment solution, of how these capabilities can be really brought together to offer, very unique capabilities, or from a mobile wallet perspective. Now, you can apply this to a sales playbook, for example, or a CRM application within enterprises. But this is a specific example of mobile wallet, where if you look at it from a core perspective, the heart of that, the diagram of the slide, you're really looking at what are the core SDLC software development lifecycle capabilities that you require to deliver mobile applications. And also in there are your core platforms and your core platform strategies, such as being able to use Antenna to deliver mobile applications. And then if you look at how to leverage the unique mobile capabilities, that's a square around it. So, we work with unique companies and partners who provide very crucial capabilities in each one of those areas. Vertica is a system integrator, so we tend to bring solutions together rather than create our solutions ground up. So if you look at voice, Xtone is a partner which really provide a conversation engine that we can deploy very quickly. And then Mitek and Abby provide the ability to do both cloud, on-device, in enterprise image processing, and Layar and ArcGIS provide core augmented reality and GIS capabilities, which we are finding to be very useful to have core GIS capabilities for scenarios especially involving offline map access. And then if you look at the bubbles around it, that's really the context coming from a mobile payment and mobile wallet perspective. So in order for a bank or a retailer to have a unique offering around mobile wallets, they really need to integrate offers, coupons, product information, loyalty, and reward, along with the ability to make payments from multiple sources. But then there also needs to be an ability to integrate things like expense management. So, especially in the credit card scenario, when you are on a trip, maybe you want to, collate your expenses while you're incurring them and be able to submit an expense very quickly right after that, after the trip is over. So we believe that, in any ecosystem, in this case, it's a mobile wallet and payment ecosystem, It could be a sales enablement ecosystem. It could be a field engineer ecosystem, or it could be um, a CRM ecosystem. You can really bring these core capabilities together, and we'll spend the next few slides kind of diving into some of these core capabilities. So the next one is voice. So I think one of the key things that we wanted to talk about voice was that the advent of Siri has really reduced the barriers that you have in terms of leveraging voice. You can really you see kids, adults out there using Siri, a very high adoption rate in the US to actually do meaningful things, and it's all really centered around task completion. So you can say things like, what are my balances, and it's a task that you're requesting your app, and the app comes back and says your savings account has so much, and your checking has so much, and so on and so forth. So that kind of an interaction, natural language processing, and natural interaction, we believe is very, very powerful. Can you move to the next slide? Can you move to the next slide, Steve?
Yeah, there's just a small delay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
So here's an example of what a mobile wallet could do. Just imagine that you've finished a trip and you're sitting in your car, and through your car dash you can communicate with your app and say create an expense report, and it kind of asks you depending on how you started the trip, it asks you where the trip was for, and it can give you a summary. So you can break that summary down by lodging, travel, meals, what are the categories that you use in your business, and collate that expense report and actually email it out. So I travel a lot, and this would be like a fantastic scenario for me where I don't really have to do a lot to create an expense report. So we believe that being able to provide these kind of unique capabilities on top of a very robust platform such as Antenna will really drive adoption in your mobile initiatives. And so, we can also take a look at how image capture, for example, or image processing helps. So if you go to the next slide, Steve. So this is an example of how we could use different aspects of an image capture. So QR code, barcodes. I think this is becoming very predominant now, where you can get offers. You can look up some products. I think E-Trade launched a very nice capability where you could you're out shopping and you can scan a barcode and it'll give you the company information. So if you're buying your favorite cereal and you think that you want to know more about the company that makes that cereal, you can just scan the barcode and it'll give you the financial information about the company, and you could potentially put it in a watch list or execute a trade if you want to at that point in time. So very interesting capability, which is kind of really at the end of the day helping you simplify your life, helping you simplify doing your regular things in a very elegant way. One of the key examples that scan receipts, there are many receipt scanning capabilities available, but when you integrate that with let's say mobile wallet, then becomes a really a different solution. But if you could scan a receipt and file it in your expenses, or better still, if you went out to buy a flat screen TV and you scanned the receipt and your app it showed you the warranty that you bought and the product that you bought and let you register it. I think there are several use cases that can really drive value both from a consumer and an enterprise perspective. And what we are seeing is this mobile visual search on the right-hand side. I think that the whole idea around being able to take a photo and do things with it, like, for example, take a photo of a car and get product information on the car, or better yet, find the nearest dealer, or even better yet, get a price quote, is a very meaningful and germane capability. Mobile visual search is a little ahead of us, but I think possibilities are very, very exciting. So with that, I'm going to kind of conclude with giving you an example of how we really, work with a very large bank to bring all of these capabilities together and drive their solutions. One of the key things that you would, a typical enterprise would consider is that, hey, I've spent the last 10, 15 years building out very robust portal capabilities, both from an SOA perspective and even from, the content delivery and service delivery perspective. How can I leverage some of those? So I think, one of the first things that we did with this particular client was to take their existing capabilities and put out a roadmap on, how exactly those capabilities can map into their mobile product offering. And products such as Antenna will provide very key capabilities in kind of accelerating the whole aspect of taking your existing SOA capabilities and capabilities for a mobile roadmap. And we really started off with, we added a whole lot of core unique mobile capabilities such as check scanning, such as bill pay, person-to-person payments, and from a wholesale banking perspective, notifications or approvals, using voice for non-repudiation, and really building out unique capabilities. I think some of the things that we are working on, from perspective, the account opening, account origination capabilities are deemed to be the most complex in terms of being able to mobilize them. So we're working with not only this particular client, but several other clients in the banking space, kind of, really figure out how to split the whole process, whether it is going to be driven by a kiosk on the bank or whether it's going to be, you enter a few things on their mobile and then complete the process in a desktop and so on and so forth. And also from a technology perspective, really helping them drive differentiated capabilities using things like voice, seamless integration with in-dash systems. So for example, if you have a Ford, we provide ability to integrate with Ford Sync, and you can really drive both. We also believe that mobile as a channel, whether that's a phone or your iPad application, is uniquely placed to drive your experience across, very large form factors such as TVs or your in-dash capabilities. So that's really, what we think from a technology perspective. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Steve. Steve, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rohit. That was great. I think we'll pause here to see if there's any questions coming in. Kristen?
Sure, Steve, we do. We have a question for the panel. What are your thoughts on multi-channel supports like iPhone, Android, BlackBerry for enterprise apps?
So this is Mike. I'll take that one. My thoughts are, our thoughts are, and our experience is that it, in most cases, is really just as important for an enterprise app as it is for a consumer app. More and more enterprises are being requested by their employees to make information available on their personal devices as opposed to on enterprise-issued, company-issued devices. And companies find it, in general, it's not well if a company is requiring their employees just a particular type of device. So it's generally best multiple types of devices with an app.
Yeah, and I think if I may add to it, the way to look at this is really, starting off with what you would think would be the largest population. So if your largest population is, for example, based on iPhone, then you start off with supporting iPhone, but have a roadmap and a strategy to kind of scale out to tablets and to other platforms. So really it is, whether you're considering a BYOD capability or whether you're considering providing devices to your employees and then enabling them, you really should consider a starting point. And what we typically see is that in many cases that starting point is either an iPhone or an iPad, and then you scale out. But when you build the capability or the infrastructure for that first app, please keep in mind that you are going to have to support other devices and other platforms down the line. So you really need that openness and that flexibility to be able to do that within your platform choice.
Great, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Rohit. I apologize for the audio difficulties there. I think we got it straightened out now. But let me dive into the last section of our webinar. And it really wouldn't be a good webinar if we didn't give you some kind of a list to go away with. So I'm going to try to spell out right now the 7 truths that are unique to business apps. And I'm going to try to leave enough time for questions at the end, so I may go fairly quickly. Number 1 is not at all obvious. Mobile first is not mobile only. If those of you who hear the words mobile first, it's kind of a new age mantra for some developers to remind themselves that, you know, almost all applications are going to be accessed over mobile devices at some point. And so you hear it a lot when people are talking about designing a new website or a new business process. You know, we got to think about mobile first. But it's important to remember that the world hasn't gone 100% mobile just yet. And new mobile apps, in many cases, have to be landline friendly. I think the best example of this, and it affects my personal life, is the Amtrak app. I travel a lot between New York and Boston almost every week, and I use the Amtrak app religiously. And I noticed that more and more people on the train are using their mobile device to show their ticket, and the conductor uses a mobile device to scan their ticket. So that's all mobile first, right? But not really. I don't buy my ticket with my Amtrak mobile app. I usually buy my ticket online before I travel. But when I do buy my ticket, it shows up in my app within a few seconds. Now, if anything ever went wrong, or I lost my phone, or I forgot to buy a ticket, I could always go to one of the kiosks in the station to print out my ticket with my reservation number, or to buy a new ticket with my credit card. So the Amtrak app is mobile friendly, yes, but it's not mobile only. I think Amtrak did a really good job of realizing that mobile is just one very important channel for passengers to buy tickets. They really designed their system to integrate mobile perfectly, but they didn't, you know, throw away all the other ways that they service their passengers. It'll be really interesting over the next few years to see if businesses like Amtrak can ever really truly phase out all the other ways of interacting with passengers other than mobile. Number 2 of the 7 truths unique to business apps, measurement is required. We talked earlier about how monitoring and management are mostly optional when it comes to games like Angry Birds, but monitoring and management are definitely not optional when it comes to enterprise apps. You know, the old saying is you can't manage what you don't measure, and that's definitely true for enterprise mobility. Enterprise mobile app administrators, they need to manage lots of things like users, apps, devices, data, but without measuring things like usage patterns and performance and completed transactions, it would be impossible for them to manage all those things that require management. So measurement is absolutely not optional. And neither is monetization. You know, there are almost 1 million apps in the public app stores, and the large majority of them do not get 50 million downloads in a month or 50 million downloads in a year. The large majority of them will never achieve 50 million downloads ever. And almost none of them, actually only one of them generates $200 million in licensing revenue like Angry Birds. Most apps in public app stores really struggle just to break even. But app developers can afford to have lots of apps that lose money because they're constantly searching for that one that's a big hit. It's kind of like venture capital investing or producing movies. You know, you can afford to have a lot of flops if you have one really big hit. But that is absolutely not true for enterprise apps. In the enterprise, monetization is usually referred to as ROI, or return on investment. And we sometimes, at Antenna, we sometimes get asked to prove the ROI of an enterprise mobility project. That's just how businesses make investment decisions. It's how they manage risk. They look at the ROI. But we frequently counsel our customers not to get too caught up in measuring the ROI because it's really sometimes difficult to prove precisely. That if you think about it logically, if you have 100 field service reps and you make them all 10% more productive, then you just produce the work of 10 new hires. If you have 500 people in your global sales team and you make them all 15% more productive, then the ROI is the value of 75 full-time sales professionals. It doesn't take huge increases in productivity or in throughput to get really exciting ROI numbers for an enterprise app. The challenge is in measuring it precisely and reporting it accurately. So monetization for an enterprise app is ROI, and it is definitely not optional. Number 4 may seem pretty obvious, but more users is not better. Unlike in the game world, where more users means more money, and so more is better, that is not true for enterprise apps. You know, if a field service app is servicing a 100-person field service team, then it should have 100 users, not more and not less. If a CRM app is servicing a 300-person sales organization, then it should have 300 users, period. It's almost the opposite of what it would be for games in a public app store. Number 5, testing is mandatory. This sounds obvious, but it really isn't. One of the reasons is because one of the methods of software development that mobile projects typically use is called agile development. And in the agile development process, it's very much about shipping a product quickly and then iterating very quickly to make it better and better and better until it's perfect, or at least until it's really good. And that process works really well for consumer apps like games. But there's 2 reasons that it's a little bit risky in the enterprise mobility space. And number 1 is that a mobile project is typically augmenting or replacing some existing process. So whether that process is mission critical, like a distribution app or a field service app, or if it's non-mission critical, like an expense reporting app, users are going to accept or reject the app based on how it helps them accomplish the task. So if it doesn't work out of the gate, it's going to be hard to go back later and say, okay, we know it didn't work right the first time, but it's fixed now, so please start using it to do your expenses. It's much easier to drive adoption amongst users if it works great on day 1. The reason number 2, maybe more important, is that enterprise mobile apps are always integrated with some other enterprise systems. So if something goes wrong with the mobile app, it can contaminate whatever enterprise system it's connected to. So just imagine a sales rep who deletes her entire Q2 pipeline because she hit delete on an email message. That would be an ugly picture. So testing, as painful as it might be for developers, is absolutely mandatory for mobile app deployment. Number 6 is help is available. No matter how much testing you do, there'll always be times when users need help. So enterprise mobile apps should always have a well-marked place where they can go get assistance. It doesn't necessarily need to be a help button that's visible on every single screen like a web app would be, but there should be a known place within every mobile app where users know they can go get help if they need it. And last and definitely not least, security is paramount. Like I talked about in the anatomy of an enterprise app section, security is probably the largest single differentiator between enterprise apps and consumer apps. Enterprise apps are integrated with back-end systems that contain proprietary data, so unauthorized access could be catastrophic. That means that security needs to be enforced at the device level, at the network level, during transmission, and also that the data storage and retention policy needs to be compliant with the corporate security policies. So it's more complicated than just saying we use HTTPS, so now it's secure. And so there you have the complete list. 7 truths unique to business apps. And with that, we will open the floor to questions, and whatever questions have been coming in throughout the course of the webinar, we'll get to as many of them as we can.
Thanks, Steve. So the first one I have here, I think Mike would be a good one to answer. App distribution is easier for Android, but Apple presents challenges. Do you recommend obtaining an enterprise Apple license or distribute ad hoc?
So that's a good question. Ad hoc is certainly an option. But if you meet the qualifications, enterprise is certainly the easier way to go. I think the only really tricky thing in the terms and conditions on the enterprise program is that all of the users need to be employees, and for certain types of applications that might be tricky. But certainly enterprise makes things much easier if you meet the qualifications.
Very good, thank you. We have another question here. It says, security seems to be the biggest difference between consumer apps and business apps. What are the best practices for building highly secure enterprise apps?
That's a great question and would require another entire webinar to answer. The good news is that our next webinar on April 11th is about exactly that. So maybe the questioner was a straight man for our next webinar. But we have a webinar coming up on April 11th where we talk about security best practices and 5 security mistakes to avoid from building enterprise apps. In the meantime, we have white papers and lots of material available on our website about enterprise security, and the questioner is exactly correct that it is, in fact, the largest differentiator between consumer-y type apps and real enterprise class mobile apps.
Thanks, Steve. You mentioned that enterprise apps are typically not distributed through app stores. Why not? Wouldn't that be the easiest way?
Great question. It's kind of related to the one Mike just answered, but enterprise apps can be distributed through public app stores, but the reason they're typically not is a couple. One is the process of getting an app approved for a public app store can be long and tedious. It also requires a certificate that needs to get signed, and it's just a process that is not necessarily necessary for an enterprise to go through. And then additionally, maintaining the app and producing updates to it requires going through that process again. And it would also require users to proactively go out and install updates, just like you do with your consumer apps on your Android or your iPhone, where enterprises don't necessarily need to have their employees go through that process when they publish apps through an enterprise app store, a private app store, or a portal. They can push updates out to consumers, out to their users without any action required on the part of the user. So I guess the short answer is it's just easier.
And I think there's also data security risk over here, or overall risk management. So, for example, if you lose your device, then just the ability to kind of, go in surgically and remove corporate information from it, from your centralized mobile application management console or your app store is very crucial. And then if you were to kind of look at being able to distribute different kinds of apps to different folks, so for example, CIOs and the CTOs may get a more secure, more across the board capability than maybe a product manager or project manager gets. And so I think, if you look at the overall desire to have a deeper level of control, both from an app perspective and also from a governance perspective, then I think you don't have that flexibility in the public app stores. So you are better off hosting, a private app store or even a portal to really be able to build upon it. And as you go down maybe 3, 4, 5 years, I think it's going to be pretty much as standard as your regular application distribution that happens to desktops today from a centralized place. So that is really why you should go for a private app store, is that you want to have, IT should have control over risk management, control over governance and what kinds of applications, what capabilities they access, and also furthermore, if they are accessing corporate sensitive data which is within the firewall, then you need to be able to have that level of control so that it's not a security threat.
Good. Thanks, Rohit. Well, guys, I think that's about all the time we have today. So I'm going to turn the call back over to Steve to wrap it up. And if you had questions that we weren't able to get to, we'll follow up with you directly.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Rohit. And thanks to Mike Hogan. And thanks to everybody for attending. We'll see you next time on April 11th. One final word, I would like to thank our friends at Rovio for producing an awesome game that consumes way too much of my time. But I'll point out that all the Angry Birds images and logos used today are trademarks of Rovio and belong exclusively to them. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.